Words are not wording today. I'm very warm and our AC is not on yet. And I am sweating and I've just started recording. And my lights aren't even that hot. It's just hot in here. Hi, welcome to my channel if you're new, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Laura. I'm a self-taught makeup enthusiast, fashion enthusiast, and graphic designer by day. And I just like talking about alternative subcultures, music, fashion, anime. I'm probably missing something here. But anyways, I've been doing this series here on my channel where I pick a focused topic about something in the alternative community that just kind of gets me thinking, and I want to start a discussion with you. So I'll sort of break it down in about 15 to 20 minutes or so and give my thoughts, and then sort of leave the comments open for a discussion. So today we're going to be addressing a comment that I saw on, I think, a Facebook group, if I remember correctly, whether you need to have a deep understanding and appreciation of the history of a subculture in order to join it, if that's a prerequisite, or if you can just join and sort of pick and choose whatever you were interested in and forget about everything that came before. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Let's just jump in. I'm gonna just ramble for a second. I like to collect Facebook groups. I will just join a whole bunch of Facebook groups on any given, not any given topic, but usually alternative focused. And sometimes the algorithm is like, oh, you like to collect Facebook groups about alternative subcultures? Here you go. Here's a new one that you might be interested in. There's this guy who apparently is quite notorious in a few of these groups and will just spam the groups and just post the same thing in every group, either a rant or a question or something like that. So he posted a rant, I guess, about alternative looking women who basically he was complaining about posers in the scene, which tale as old as time. That sort of made me think, and I wanted to comment on it. I don't want to embarrass him, and I don't want people to pile on him, because I feel like people were already doing that in the groups. But long story short, he was like,
I met this goth girl at this club event, and she was so beautiful. And then I asked her who her favorite goth bands were, and she gave me a 20-minute dissertation on Youngblood, and she didn't even know who Bauhaus is.
I'm really not hating on this guy, and on the off chance that he happens to stumble across my video, this is really not targeted at you. It was kind of more of this is an interesting topic, let's explore it a little bit more. Let's first distinguish between posers in the scene and baby bats, or new, often younger people in the alternative scene, because I feel like we kind of have to differentiate the intention. New people in the scene, often younger people, somehow stumble across alternative music, alternative fashion. They are so excited about it, they want to dive right in. When you're joining a subculture, you're going to Google alternative music or your alternative fashion. You're going to go down that rabbit hole. The search results are probably, not necessarily, but probably going to come up with more modern brands, outfit, inspo, creators, music, movies, etc. I don't think it's productive to shame people for being interested in newer music in the scene. Compare that with posers who basically are there for the vibes. It's very surface level. They're interested in maybe the fashion, maybe they think it's kind of more of a costume than deeply resonating with it. Maybe, I don't know, their friends are all into it, but they're really not. And they're just there for, to have a good time, but they're not, shall we say, passionate about it. It doesn't really resonate with them in the same way. Maybe, alternative fashion happens to be trending at the time, like it was in sort of 2020, 2021, and then they move on to the next trend. The first example There's passion, there's excitement, there's an eagerness to learn. You know, you're picking the things that you're interested in, but you're invested in the subculture. Versus the second example with kind of posers, if you want to call them that. They're not really looking to connect the music, the art, the fashion. It's sort of like a fun little thing for now and not really deep and meaningful to them. It's like it's a trend, it's a short time thing, and then once that's not popular anymore, they just kind of move on, and that's that. They might be interested in it because they're dating someone in the scene, and then if that relationship ends, then they just move on and leave the scene. It's not really something that deeply encompasses who they are. Cool, now that we've gotten that out of the way, my battery looks like it's gonna die soon, and that's annoying. I really like what I have going on with my eyebrows today. All I did was use a bit of concealer just to kind of like make them look a little bit skinnier, and I actually quite like what's going on. There's always a discussion. I feel like this comes up like probably every generation of alternative people. Gatekeeping. What do we do? Should we do it? Is it good? Is it bad? Let's discuss. I think it's kind of ridiculous to have rules or, you know, membership quotas or limitations on joining an alternative subculture when the whole point of those alternative subcultures is essentially a group of misfits who don't really fit in one way or another, or don't feel like they fit into sort of mainstream society. They connect with other people who don't really feel like they fit in, who kind of feel like, you know, black sheep in their families and their communities and, you know, wherever. And that's what kind of part of what brings the community together. Like, obviously there's, you know, the music, the fashion, the blah, 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 but there's also the fact that a group of people who don't fit in found a community of like-minded people, and now they found a place where they feel like they fit in. When you already have a group of people like that, I don't think it's productive to gatekeep and make people feel like they're being excluded when they already feel like they're being excluded from society. With that being said, I know some people are going to jump on their keyboards and get so mad at me. With that being said, should there be prerequisites to joining communities or subcultures such as goth or punk, which have been around for a while and have a deep history that have had like generations now of musicians, art created, even though the subcultures and the music have evolved since then? Should it be required that in order to join those communities, you have to, I don't know, I guess maybe prove in some way that you've done your homework and that you are familiar with, or that you've listened to artists from kind of the early era of those movements? In other words, because I feel like that was quite wordy, I don't know, for example, if you're learning about the goth subculture, you're like, yeah, I resonate a lot with this, I want to join. Should you be required to listen or be a huge fan of Susie and the Banshees or Bauhaus, or there's another one that I can't think of right now? Should that be a rule, a hard rule that you can't consider yourself goth unless you like these bands, unless you've listened to them, unless you can name 3 songs, etc.? Should we shame or exclude baby bats or new people in various alt subcultures if they don't know the history, they don't listen to fundamental artists, i.e. artists kind of from the beginning of that subculture? Let's discuss, let's analyze, and actually, like, comment below. I'd love to know your opinions on this. So on the one hand, goth or punk wouldn't be the movements that they are without those foundational artists. Like, goth wouldn't be goth without Susie Sue, without Bauhaus, without... Is typo negative later? I feel like they're later. Anyways, without foundational artists like that, those movements wouldn't be what they are today. They wouldn't have the aesthetics, the sounds, the vibe that they have today. Even if other artists came in, the scene and the subculture would evolve differently if those artists hadn't been around and making art when they were. Punk wouldn't be punk without the Sex Pistols or the Ramones or the Clash, right? Metal wouldn't be metal without Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin or, I mean, they were later, but Metallica, right? These bands made those scenes, those subcultures, those communities, what they are today. Even if the music has evolved, the sounds are a bit different, the visuals are a bit different, things evolve and change, should you at least like those artists? You don't have to be the biggest fan in the world, they don't have to be your favorite artists, but should you at least like those artists in order to join those scenes? Should you at least be aware of the history to be able to join the scene? Should you at least like those bands? Is that important to call yourself a goth, punk, metalhead, etc.? If the answer is yes, this is part of the subculture's history. You know, this is the foundation. This is the reason why the subculture is the way it is. The subculture wouldn't look and sound the way it does without these artists. They built it from the ground up. And then also, from sort of a social perspective, if you're new on the scene, you probably want to meet other people. You want to integrate into the community. And what better way to do that than to talk to elder goths or elder emos or elder, alt people in the community. And I say like elders in quotes because I mean, like, I don't know, I'm 34 and I've been in the scene since I was 10. So like, I guess that technically makes me elder, but I'm not old, but anyways, what's my point? So, you're joining the scene, you want to integrate into the community, you want to learn from people who have been in the community longer. Chances are those elders, if you want to call them that, are big fans of older or more foundational bands. So just, from kind of a social perspective, you want to be able to talk about the same things and kind of be on the same level. And so if you aren't familiar with those founding bands, then it kind of makes it a little bit awkward, and it sort of feels like, well, do you even know about this scene? Like, who do you actually listen to then? It sort of potentially can give off poser vibes. So that's in favor of, yes, listening to or knowing the history. However, counter argument, yes, it's true that these bands might have founded the subculture or been integral in founding the subculture. However, things change. Sounds evolve, aesthetics evolve. Every year there's, a whole host of new bands in any subculture making new music. There's always going to be new stuff. Should we disregard all of these new bands to sort of put these old founding bands on kind of a pedestal? Subcultures are not static. They're amorphous, right? They evolve, they change, the way that, let's say, the metal scene looks now, and the way that metal sounds now, and the way that metal music is produced now is very different from the beginning of that genre or subculture. Subcultures and music evolve in response to technology, in response to politics, world news. Things change. And also genres blend together, and that creates new art. So your favorite artists, your favorite contemporary artists might have been inspired by older foundational bands, but the art that they're creating might sound different. Their visuals might be very different from things from, 30, 40 years ago. They took it and made it their own. They're not just doing, copy paste. They're changing it, they're evolving it. And I don't think this is a bad thing. So I see a lot of people who are, for lack of a better term, stuck in the past. If that's what you want to listen to, like, that's fine. I'm really not criticizing that. But I also don't think it's helpful to, or productive for any scene, to remain in the past, to remain stuck in the past, only listening to the same things from like 40 years ago, when you have to acknowledge at least that music, subcultures, things change and evolve. I know as you get older, it's scary to have things change, especially things that you feel very strongly and passionately about. But scenes, subcultures now, even if you've been in part of that scene your entire life, it's gonna look different now for, new people joining the scene compared to when you were young and first joining the scene. In other words, when you were a baby bat, things looked a certain way. It hasn't stayed like that. New people on the scene dress differently, look differently, listen to different things, potentially. The internet makes things very different, so you kind of have to acknowledge that as well. I don't think it's realistic to expect things not to change. I don't think it's realistic to expect things not to change or expect younger people to instantly take a liking to older music when just general trends of music now sound different, production is a lot different, the technology is different. Older music sometimes sounds less polished than music today, which people could argue is sort of overproduced. But regardless, you can't expect younger people to instantly be like, oh, I prefer music from like, I don't know, the 70s or 80s, when all they're hearing around them is kind of more polished, genre-bending music from today. There's still alternative artists that are making music that sounds radically different than, I don't know, The Clash, but still is classified as alternative, goth, punk, whatever. People like what they like, and I don't think it's like productive to, I don't know, shame people for not liking the music that you like. This is my controversial opinion. Just because something is old or foundational to a scene or, I don't know, groundbreaking for its time. So like, just because, let's say what the Beatles did was very revolutionary and different and experimental for their time, doesn't mean that just because that music is old, you automatically have to like it because it's old. Doesn't mean that people have to think it's good just because it is foundational to music history, to certain subcultures that you identify with. Just because you think it's good, just because, I keep going back to Susie and Bauhaus, but like, okay, just because, you know, Susie Sue is your favorite artist in the world and she was one of the pillars or foundations of the goth subculture, you're such a huge fan, you think it's so important. Baby bats don't have to feel the same way in order to fit in with the scene. Assuming, of course, that they, you know, connect with the music, maybe not that particular artist, but, you know, other artists, the fashion, the sort of outlook on life, etc., etc. Sure, it's nice for baby bats to study the old texts, but is it a requirement to prefer foundational, you know, older music over modern music, to sort of create this hierarchy system where it's like,
oh, well, you don't listen to Typo Negative? Are you even a real goth?
like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? My personal opinion is, I think it's nice to have a familiarity at least. You know, it's nice if you kind of give some of the original bands a listen. Should it be required that every time you want to sit down and listen to some goth music, you put on Bauhaus instead of Youngblood? If you're not into Bauhaus and you really enjoy Youngblood, then like, why would you torture yourself? How do I say this without calling people out? I know people with this attitude, like, I mean, this guy that I'm definitely not attacking, but I know other people who sort of think that anything old has to be revered when it comes to like sort of art, music, etc. More recent stuff is like somehow less important or less, not less valued, but like it's good, but it's no insert original artist here. Like if you prefer newer artists and listen to newer artists, and I don't think you're any less of a goth, punk, whatever, just because you prefer newer artists. That might be controversial, but that's just my opinion. I would love to hear from you. What do you think? Do you think it's required to study the old texts and be completely familiar with the entire works of Susie Sue and Bauhaus and Typo Negative and, I don't know, the Sex Pistols, whoever, in order to join a scene? Or do you think maybe you should have a passing familiarity, you know, check out a couple songs, just kind of get a sense of the history a little bit before kind of finding what you like? Or do you think it doesn't matter about the history and you should just listen to what you listen to, and that's that, regardless of whether, you know, elder goths look down on you or not. So comment below. I'd love to have a discussion on this because this topic is fascinating. It's interesting to see how communities change and evolve, especially when newer people join the community and the attitudes around that. Subscribe to my channel. I post here about once a week or so, and I've been really enjoying doing these sort of short, focused deep dives on a topic within the alternative community. So follow for more discussions, and I will see you in my next video.